Seat 12F wasn't supposed to hold a legend that day. To most passengers, he was just another tired father with an olive green jacket and an 8-year-old boy tugging at his sleeve. But to those who knew his name, Ethan Ramirez, the man sitting quietly by the window, had once been a ghost in the skies. The plane hummed with post-holiday chatter as families wrestled with carry-ons and business travelers typed away. Lucas, Ethan's son, leaned close, his eyes still heavy with innocence, unaware that his father had traded battlefields for bedtime stories. 6 months ago, Ethan had walked away from the cockpit of an F-22 Raptor, the kind of decision that rips a man in two. He hadn't left because he wanted to. He left because he had no choice. Since cancer stole his wife 2 years earlier, Lucas had only one parent left, and Ethan knew he couldn't keep being a shadow on the other side of a video call while deployment swallowed the years. And now, on this crowded flight from Denver to Atlanta, the silence around him was deafening. Every vibration of the engines reminded him of what he'd lost. The roar of afterburners, the rush of combat, the sky itself. Yet beside him sat the only reason that mattered. Lucas looked up, his small voice breaking the storm inside his father's head. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan forced a smile, hiding the ache behind his dark eyes. "Yes, son, I'm exactly where I need to be." But fate had other plans for Seat 12F. Plans that would not let the ghost of the skies stay hidden for long. Lucas's forehead pressed against the cold airplane window, his breath fogging up the glass. The taxiing jet lurched forward, and suddenly, his eyes widened. "Dad, look, jets." His voice cracked with excitement, high-pitched enough to make a few passengers nearby turn their heads. Ethan leaned closer, following his son's gaze. Just beyond the civilian tarmac, gleaming under the pale afternoon sun, stood a formation of fighters sleek, razor-sharp silhouettes of power and menace. For most people on board, they were simply background scenery. But for Ethan, every line of their fuselage cut deep into memory. Those weren't just jets. They were predators of the sky. "Those are F-22 Raptors," Ethan said, his tone steady, but his heart betraying him with a sharp twist. Lucas pressed his hands flat against the window, as though he could reach through it and touch them. His voice dropped to a whisper, almost reverent. "They look alive." Ethan swallowed hard. Alive was exactly the word. The Raptor wasn't just a machine, it was a beast built for war, able to slip into the sky unseen, strike, and vanish like a phantom. And for 8 years, Ethan had ridden inside that beast, becoming one with its metal, its thunder, its hunger. For a moment, the sound of the engines around him dissolved, replaced by echoes of his past. The deafening roar as afterburners kicked, the violent shake of turbulence at Mach speed, the blur of desert terrain flashing thousands of feet below. His chest tightened. He could almost feel the stick in his hand again. "Dad." Lucas nudged him, dragging him back from the battlefield in his head. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, kiddo. The most advanced fighter jets in the world. Nothing else comes close." Lucas grinned, his boyish teeth showing. "Did you fly them?" The question was innocent, but it struck like shrapnel. Ethan's lips parted, and for a heartbeat, he thought of deflecting, of brushing it off like any casual conversation between a father and son. But Lucas's eyes were locked on him, full of unfiltered pride, the kind of look that could strip a man of every excuse. "Yeah," Ethan said finally, his voice low. "I flew them." Lucas's gasp was loud enough to draw a chuckle from a businessman 2 rows ahead. "No way. You flew those?" Ethan nodded. For a long time, he didn't say more. He didn't say how many nights he'd spent in the cockpit, body numb, mind razor sharp, knowing a wrong move at 200 miles per hour meant vanishing into fire. He didn't say how many times the call sign Spectre had echoed over comms, followed by orders that would haunt his dreams. Instead, he let Lucas beam at him, let the boy see only the glory, not the scars. The jets outside seemed to shimmer in the sun, almost mocking him. They were still there, untouched, eternal, deadly while he was grounded, tethered by grief and responsibility. For years, he'd been the hunter. Now, he was just another passenger at 12F. Strapped in, powerless. Lucas tapped the glass again. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to fly one of those, just like you." Ethan's stomach knotted. He wanted to say don't. He wanted to tell his son the truth, that behind the shine of polished steel was a life built on sacrifice, on nightmares, on brothers lost. That being a pilot meant being ready to disappear in silence, with no guarantee of coming home. But he didn't. He placed a steady hand on Lucas's shoulder and whispered, "We'll see, buddy, we'll see." The boy smiled, satisfied, returning his gaze to the fighters outside. But Ethan kept staring, his jaw tight, every nerve screaming the truth he couldn't voice. The sky doesn't let go of its ghosts, and for a man once called Spectre, ghosts had a way of finding him even at 30. Sir Zarafit. The hush of admiration from Lucas had barely faded when a voice, calm yet sharp, cut through the cabin noise. "Excuse me." Ethan turned, meeting the eyes of the woman across the aisle. Her blonde hair was tied back with surgical precision, her navy blazer crisp as if it had come straight from the dry cleaner. She carried herself like someone used to commanding attention without ever raising her voice. Her laptop was closed now, her gaze fixed entirely on him. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, her words deliberate. "Careful. You seem familiar with military aircraft?" Ethan studied her for a beat, weighing the curiosity in her tone. Civilians often asked about jets, sometimes with awe, sometimes with ignorance. But there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't just curious, she was probing. Before he could respond, Lucas jumped in, his little voice bursting with pride. "My dad flew them. The really fast ones." Rachel's brows lifted, her expression sharpened, like a hunter scenting movement in the brush. "Is that so?" Ethan laid a hand on his son's shoulder, the warning gentle but firm. "Lucas, remember what we talked about. No bothering people." But Rachel leaned forward, brushing his concern aside with a warm, almost conspiratorial smile. "Oh, he's not bothering me at all." She extended her hand across the aisle, her nails short, unpolished. "Practical?" Rachel Morgan, Aviation Weekly. Ethan felt a flicker of recognition. He'd seen that magazine more than once in ready rooms. Glossy covers splashed with headlines about stealth technology, global exercises, and the future of air combat. Journalists like her fed the civilian world glimpses of the shadows he once lived in. "I'm actually working on a feature," she continued. "Modern fighter pilots, their lives, their sacrifices. Rarely do I meet someone who can talk about Raptors outside of official channels." Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing him. "Would you mind telling me your connection to them?" The question hung in the air, heavy. Ethan shifted in his seat. He could feel Lucas's eyes on him, shining with unfiltered pride. To his boy, the answer was simple. His dad was a hero. To Ethan, it was a wound stitched shut, threatened now by a stranger's pen. Rachel's pen. To be precise, the one now resting on the notebook in her lap, ready to carve his life into words. Lucas didn't wait. He beamed at her. "My dad was a pilot. He flew Raptors. He's the best." The words echoed louder than the roar of any engine. A businessman 2 rows up paused mid-email. A flight attendant slowed in the aisle, stealing a glance. The cabin seemed to tilt toward their row, as if the gravity of the revelation pulled every ear closer. Ethan's jaw clenched. He could almost feel the weight of the helmet again, the mask pressing against his face, the call sign crackling through the comms. He remembered the desert sky lit with tracer fire, the invisible enemy radar hunting him. He remembered the taste of fear swallowed whole until nothing was left but instinct. He met Rachel's gaze, steady, unwilling to give her more than he must. "Yes," he said finally. His voice clipped. "I have some experience with them." Rachel's smile deepened, professional but edged with hunger. She'd smelled blood. This wasn't just a casual encounter anymore. It was a lead, maybe the biggest of her career. And Ethan knew, in that instant, that C-12F was no longer just a seat on a crowded plane. It had become a spotlight, and he was trapped in its glare. For a moment, Ethan considered staying silent. Evasion had become second nature. Deflect, downplay, disappear. But Lucas's eager face left him no room to hide. "Yes," Ethan said finally, his voice low but steady. "I flew Raptors. For 8 years." The words seemed to strike the cabin like a spark in dry grass. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Even the constant hum of the engines seemed to hush, as though the aircraft itself wanted to listen. Rachel's pen froze above her notebook. Her pupils widened, calculating. 8 years. That's remarkable. You know how rare that is, don't you? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. She already knew. Only about 180 pilots on Earth had ever been cleared to command an F-22 Raptor. They weren't just pilots, they were chosen, sculpted by years of relentless training until man and machine became indistinguishable. And for 8 years, Ethan Ramirez had been one of them. Before Rachel could press further, the captain's voice broke through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be holding briefly military exercises in the area." Gasps rippled across the cabin as passengers craned toward the windows, and then like phantoms conjured from Ethan's past 2 F-22s streaked into view above the commercial jet, sunlight glinting off their gray skin. They slid across the sky in razor-sharp formation, silent predators watching from 1,000 feet above. The sight ignited the cabin. Cell phones snapped upward, fingers pointed. A child squealed in delight. Lucas's nose pressed to the glass. "Dad, look, they're just like the ones you flew." The words rang out like a flare shot across the sky. An older gentleman in the row behind leaned forward, his voice rich with curiosity. "Son, did I hear right? Your father flew those?" Lucas spun in his seat, pride swelling in his small chest. Yes, sir. He was amazing. He's got medals and everything." The declaration detonated like a grenade. The businessman who had been typing stopped mid-keystroke. The flight attendant paused with a tray balanced in her hands. Even the quiet woman reading a novel in the corner lowered her book, her eyes locking on Ethan. Medals. The word stabbed at Ethan like a blade. He had them. Yes, tucked away in drawers, gathering dust. Shiny tokens that meant nothing compared to the faces that never came home. Each ribbon weighed more than its metal, carrying names, call signs, and ghosts. He shifted uncomfortably, heat rising in his cheeks. "Lucas," but it was too late. The spark had become a fire. Rachel leaned forward, her voice deceptively soft. "Medals. Tell me, Mr. Ramirez, just how decorated are you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to shut it all down, bury it under silence. But the Raptors outside circled like reminders, their shadowy presence pressing on him. And the passengers, all of them, were staring now, staring at him as though they'd boarded a plane with a living myth. He exhaled slowly, forcing composure. "I did my job, that's all." But the cabin didn't believe him. Not after 8 years in the Raptor, not after medals, not after Lucas's prideful outburst. Ethan knew the truth. The past he'd tried to bury had followed him onto Flight 227. It had taken Seat 12F hostage, and with 2 Raptors slicing through the sky outside, there was no escaping it now. Rachel's pen tapped softly against her notebook, her eyes narrowing like a predator circling closer. "Tell me, Mr. Ramirez," she said, her voice deceptively gentle. "What was your call sign?" The words froze Ethan in place. He hadn't heard that question in months, years. Maybe his call sign wasn't just a nickname. It was a brand burned into the annals of pilots who had fought, trained, and bled under the same banner. It carried weight. It carried ghosts. Lucas looked up, wide-eyed, eager. "Dad, tell her." Ethan's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, he considered lying, offering some throwaway name to deflect, but Rachel's gaze pinned him down, and the boy beside him was waiting, desperate to hear the truth. Finally, he exhaled and let the word slip, quiet but sharp enough to slice through the hum of the cabin. Spectre. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the plane. The name hung in the air, heavy, electric. A ripple passed through the cabin as though the passengers sensed something monumental had just been revealed, even if they didn't understand why. From several rows ahead, a man's head jerked up. He wore a casual button-down shirt. His posture relaxed until now, his spine straightened. His eyes locked onto Ethan like a targeting system zeroing in. He stood, moving down the aisle with quick, purposeful steps. The way he carried himself betrayed his past long before his words did. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling with awe. "Did you just say Spectre?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Yes." The man extended his hand, his grip firm, almost reverent. "Major Daniel Hughes, United States Air Force, F-16 pilot, Shaw Air Force Base." He paused, breathless. "It's an honor." "Sir, a real honor. I've heard the stories." Passengers leaned in, whispers sparking like wildfire. Rachel's pen scratched furiously across the page. Hughes continued, his voice brimming with excitement. "Red flag exercises, the kill records, the missions overseas. Spectre, your name is spoken with nothing but respect in the community. You're a legend. Ethan's face tightened, his eyes flicking to Lucas. The boy was beaming, his chest puffed with pride. To Lucas, this was the moment his father became larger than life. To Ethan, it was the exact opposite, the past clawing its way back, refusing to stay buried. He shook Hugh's hand once, firmly, then tried to release, but Hughes held on a fraction longer, reluctant to let go of the man whose stories had fueled countless briefings and hangar whispers. You changed the standard. Sir, Hughes said quietly. Every young pilot wanted to fly like Spectre. The cabin seemed to tilt again, passengers shifting in their seats, hungry for more. They weren't just looking at a man in seat 12F anymore. They were staring at a living ghost, a legend made flesh. And Ethan felt the walls closing in. I appreciate it, Major, he said, his voice even but edged with steel. But legends are for the dead. I'm just a father now. Still, the damage was done. The name Spectre had been spoken aloud. It could not be unsaid. And on this flight, at 30,000 feet, Ethan Ramirez was no longer anonymous. He was exposed. The cabin still buzzed with the echo of Ethan's call sign when Major Hughes spoke again, his voice filled with awe. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know who you are sitting with? This man, Spectre, once rewrote history at Red Flag. Whispers darted through the rows. Red Flag. The name alone carried weight in military circles. It was the crucible where the world's best pilots were pushed beyond their limits, a proving ground where survival meant skill, nerve, and instinct sharpened to a blade's edge. Hughes straightened, addressing the gathering crowd as though he were giving a briefing in a ready room. 5 days. That's all it took. 5 days. And Spectre scored 17 confirmed simulated kills, 17 enemy aircraft, one after another, while flying in exercises designed to replicate the deadliest combat scenarios imaginable. No one before him, no one since. That record still stands. The cabin erupted in murmurs. Passengers twisted in their seats, staring openly now. Someone gasped. Another whispered the word hero as though saying it too loudly might break the spell. Ethan's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the armrest. He had never cared about records. Each tally mark in those exercises had only been practice, preparation for the day. The bullets and missiles weren't blanks. And when that day came, no medal, no statistic, no whispered legend could erase the faces of those who never made it home. Lucas looked up at him, his eyes shimmering with pride. To the boy, his father wasn't just dad anymore. He was Spectre, the man who had outflown death itself. Hughes lowered his voice. Reverend, sir, you didn't just win. You changed the game. Every young pilot at Nellis wanted to fly like you. Even now, cadets hear your name and know exactly what it means. Rachel scribbled furiously in her notebook, her expression caught between shock and hunger. She had stumbled upon something larger than any feature article. She had stumbled upon a man who embodied both myth and mystery. But Ethan shook his head slowly. His voice, when it came, was steady. Stripped of vanity, I did what every pilot is trained to do. I flew the missions. I followed the orders. Nothing more. The words fell heavy, like iron dropped on stone. He wanted them to end the conversation, to silence the whispers. But the cabin didn't want modesty. They wanted the legend. They wanted Spectre. An elderly woman leaned across the aisle, her voice trembling. Young man, forgive me, but isn't that the definition of a hero? The question sliced through him. He felt every eye waiting for his answer. He exhaled, his gaze settling on Lucas. I'm no hero, Ethan said softly. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home. The ones whose names aren't spoken in crowded cabins, but carved into stone, into memory. I was just a man doing his job. Silence rippled outward, swallowing the chatter. Even Hughes fell quiet, his admiration now tempered with respect for the humility before him. And in that silence, Ethan Ramirez sat in seat 12F, a living legend who wanted nothing more than to be a father. The silence in the cabin deepened after Ethan's quiet refusal to be called a hero. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Major Hughes leaned forward, his voice carrying both respect and disbelief. Sir, forgive me for asking, but why did you leave? Pilots like you do not just walk away. Men of your caliber make it a career for life. Every passenger within earshot turned to listen. Even Rachel, her pen hovering over the page, seemed to stop breathing. Ethan looked at Hughes, then at the boy beside him. Lucas was swinging his legs innocently, unaware of the weight pressing down on his father's chest. Ethan inhaled slowly, as if pulling the words out of a place he rarely visited. "My wife died 2 years ago." The sentence landed like a hammer. A woman in the row across covered her mouth. Rachel blinked, stunned. Ethan continued, his voice steady but raw. "Cancer took her. Suddenly it was just me and Lucas. I tried to stay in the service. I tried to convince myself I could balance both worlds. But every deployment meant leaving him behind. 10 months out of the year, I was nothing more than a face on a screen. And every time I saw him through that grainy video call, I knew I was failing him." He paused. The cabin was utterly still now. The only sound was the faint whir of the engines, the steady heartbeat of the plane carrying his confession. "I had to choose, keep flying, or be the father he needed. The Air Force made me who I am." But Lucas lost his mother. He could not lose his father too. Lucas looked up at him then, confusion and curiosity flickering in his young eyes. "Dad, you mean you left for me?" Ethan swallowed, his throat tightening. He reached over, took his son's small hand in his own. "Yes, buddy, for you, the skies will always be there. But your childhood will not. I was not going to miss it." The weight of those words spread through the cabin like a wave. Even the businessman who had rolled his eyes earlier was leaning in. His expression softened. The elderly woman who had called him a hero wiped at her eyes. Rachel closed her notebook completely, no longer chasing a story. She was staring at Ethan as if she had just witnessed the very definition of sacrifice. Hughes straightened, his jaw set, his respect only deepening. "That may be the bravest choice of all. Sir, most of us would not have had the strength to walk away." But Ethan shook his head slowly. His eyes never left his son's face. Strength had nothing to do with it. It was the only choice that mattered. Flying was who I was, but being his father is who I am now. The engines hummed. The cabin vibrated gently as the plane continued its journey east. Yet the passengers no longer felt like they were on a routine flight. They felt like witnesses to something far greater than turbulence or altitude. In seat 12F, a man once called Spectre had revealed the truth that bound him more tightly than any cockpit ever could. Not the glory of the sky, but the gravity of love. Lucas's small hand slid into Ethan's, warm and trembling with unspoken emotion. The boy's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Yet it cut through the heavy silence of the cabin. "Dad, I'm glad you came back." The word struck Ethan harder than any missile ever had. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. In that fragile moment, the roar of jet engines and the weight of call signs, medals, and legends all fell away. What remained was this boy, his son, the only mission that truly mattered. Ethan squeezed Lucas's hand, forcing his voice to stay steady, though his heart was breaking open. "I'm glad too, buddy. More than you'll ever know." The cabin, once filled with curiosity and whispers, had gone silent, every passenger unwilling to break the intimacy of the moment. Even Rachel lowered her pen, her journalistic instincts disarmed by something rawer than any headline. Major Hughes, still standing nearby, cleared his throat, his voice respectful. "Sir, if I may, there are pilots who would give everything to learn from you. If you ever wanted to step back in the cockpit, even as an instructor, the Air Force would welcome you in a heartbeat." All eyes shifted to Ethan. For a heartbeat, he felt the sky tug at him again, calling like an old flame refusing to be forgotten. He imagined the Raptors cockpit, the stick beneath his hand, the burn of afterburners pushing him into the stratosphere. A part of him ached for it, the part that would always belong to the sky. But then Lucas looked up at him with those wide, unguarded eyes. The choice was clear. Ethan shook his head gently, offering Hughes a faint smile. "Thank you, Major, but my flying days are behind me now." Hughes nodded slowly, the disappointment clear. But so was the respect. He understood that this was not a refusal born of weakness, but of strength, the kind of strength it takes to let go. Rachel leaned forward, her voice low, almost pleading. "Mr. Ramirez, I know you value your privacy, but the public needs stories like yours, not the classified missions or the details, but the truth about sacrifice, about what it really costs to serve. Would you ever consider sharing that one day?" Ethan studied her for a moment. The journalist in her wanted the myth, the legend, the man called Spectre, but the woman behind the pen, the human being, wanted something deeper. She wanted people to understand. He glanced down at Lucas, who was still holding his hand as if afraid to let go. Ethan's smile softened, a mixture of pride and surrender. Maybe one day, but right now, my most important mission is sitting right here beside me. Rachel's eyes glistened, and even Hughes bowed his head, humbled. The entire cabin seemed to exhale at once, the tension dissolving into a reverent quiet. Ethan Ramirez, once Spectre, once the hunter of skies, had finally revealed the truth. Heroism was not measured by kill counts or medals. It was measured in love, in sacrifice, in choosing family over glory. And as the plane pushed forward into the endless horizon, Ethan knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Lucas stared at his father, eyes shining like stars caught between awe and love. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Of all the medals, of all the victories, no words had ever struck deeper. He leaned close, his voice firm but tender. "Then remember this, son, be kind, be honest, and always put family first. The rest will follow." The cabin was silent, every passenger holding their breath as though witnessing something holy. Ethan Ramirez, once known as Spectre, was not remembered for kill counts or missions. He was remembered in that moment for something greater, for showing that sometimes the truest form of heroism is not found in the sky, but in the love of a father choosing family over glory. Spectre's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest hero is a father who chooses family over glory. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on this heartwarming and surprising journey.